Antonio troll. People wonder why when I see 210 pop up during live calls, I say San Antonio's a problematic area code for us.
Good evening. Welcome to WRWK, nonprofit community radio serving Richmond and Chesterfield Market. We are here tonight to introduce to you Jamal Thomas. We have a new show, the Progressive Soapbox Radio Hour. And before we get started, I'd like to thank some of our supporters here of WRK, the WRWK 93.9 FM, The Work. We'd like to thank Jeremy Rowan, Affordable Home Inspection. We'd like to thank the Thrifty Quaker. And we'd like to thank all of the board members that are supporting us and the community members supporting us. The list is a little bit long, so I'll just stop right there. And without delay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you Jamal Thomas.
What's happening?
Good evening.
How you doing today, man? Everything good?
Everything is great, and we're very excited to have you.
Well, I am very excited to be here. Guys, my name is Jamal Thomas. I am the new voice on your radio hour on Tuesdays, at the very least for the foreseeable future. So this will be the voice in your drive time hour that be digging into your ear sockets. So first, just to give you guys a heads up about me, because at this point you probably say, who in the world is this disembodied voice that is coming to my earways as I'm driving home or as I am on the way home? I am a Richmond native. I was born and raised here in Richmond, Virginia at MCV Hospital, 6:05 in the morning on August the 31st. I have several degrees, one in holistic nutrition as a bachelor's. I couldn't do anything with that one, so I went back to get another one. In software, started working as a software engineer for roughly a decade while finishing up my bachelor's and getting another, finishing up the degrees in Associates of Science. And also a certificate in comp sci. Beyond that, though, beyond the education thing, the thing that really informs me kind of goes beyond the education. I've dealt with medical illness from the time I was a kid. On top of that, that gives me a certain point of view in regards to the way I look at the world. I am an unabashed lefty. I am to the left, and I am unabashed on that particular point. But that said, though, I tend to be extraordinarily honest and straightforward when I'm analyzing news and politics. This show will focus on international news, not to mention politics on a federal level, with a strong bend towards historical context and historical precedent. If you don't like something I say, you are more than invited to call in, or for the matter, if you do like something I say, you're more invited to call in. My rule on the show, on my YouTube show, my YouTube audience knows me at this point, that if I say something about someone or if I bring up a topic, people usually have no issue in telling me that they have an issue with something that I'm saying, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So I am not a fan of either party. So this show is not going to be a rah-rah for the Democratic Party, nor is it going to be a rah-rah for the Republican Party, and I tend to think that both are the problem. Oftentimes not the solution to various items. I often think that the mainstream media doesn't necessarily give an honest portrayal of a historical context. They give things from a quote-unquote America perspective, which is not necessarily the perspective you want if you want to avoid wars. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my perspective. I tend to focus more on issues of class as opposed to issues of race, because I think issues of class or issues of race are often folded in, and there's this kind of weird feedback loop between the two. The Democratic Party tend to be identitarians and tend to focus on issues of race in order to ignore the issues of class. And this show tends to call that out also. So this show is not necessarily a rah-rah for either of the parties. And like I said, I think both are the issue. If you're looking for somebody to be a rah-rah and to be entirely in the perspective of one of the camps, you are going to be sorely mistaken and sorely bothered by this show, because the show does not do that. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about the perspective of the show. And, you know, it's funny, I don't fully encase myself in the local politics, even though those things may come up. And again, if you're encouraged to call in and talk about that stuff. So you can call us at 804-464-1089. 804-464-1089. Right, and the number's behind me. And by, by the way, yeah, the number's behind me, so feel free to call in if you want to talk about one of the subjects that we are talking about. Again, guys, we are a radio show that's trying to grow. We're a small audience in Chesterfield, and our goal is to expand and to grow. And so if you guys like what you're hearing and you want more of this, let us know. The show can expand. And also, if you're looking to underwrite these shows because you love the fact that we are a talk show and, we're not, our coffers aren't filling with corporate cash, please consider underwriting this show. I often tell people on my YouTube audience to like and to share and all the other good stuff. And please do that, like and share. But if you find yourself coming back to this particular show often in the Chesterfield audience, please consider underwriting the show. Yes. Yes. Look, we're trying to expand. We're trying to grow. And it's one of those things that if you want to expand and you want to grow, you need assistance and help, especially if you are a talk show. And so that's one of those things that you will probably hear us bring up often. If Democracy Now! And NPR can spend like a month screaming about, give us money, give us money, give us money. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, if you guys love the show and you want to underwrite, feel free. So there are a few stories that I want to get into today, and I think the format of the show is probably going to be a larger segment in the beginning with various smaller segments throughout. The first segment, of course, is just, this is who I am. This is why I am doing the show. This is how I got involved in radio. Look, my position on some of this stuff, especially in regards to politics, is full support for Medicare for all, full support for college for each and every person. There is a basic thing on this notion of freedom, and this belief that freedom is somehow freedom for 1%. I think that's nonsense. If you're talking about freedom, you're talking about people having the ability to, hey, first, be healthy, first, have food, first, being able to go to school, to be able to, feel that level of freedom that these guys are talking about. It's like, man, I am so free that I'm working 80 hours a week or 40 or 50 hours a week and I barely make ends meet. That's not freedom. That's something else. This channel focuses on those particular issues because those issues are not things that are not necessarily brought up in mainstream media, with the exception of this election, because of one Mr. Independent Senator from Vermont running in the Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders. So that's me. That's my perspective. That's the way I look at politics. I tend to, again, be a little to the left, further to the left than most. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I want to get to the first story for the night, though, unless we have a break or something. Okay, good. First story for the night. I want to talk about Epstein. This case is weird. This case is extremely weird. And I've been following this case from the beginning. An international pedophile gets locked up. He gets caught. He gets caught twice. The first time around, he gets caught. Acosta, Trump's labor secretary, gives him a sweetheart deal where he doesn't even tell the victims that he was getting that sweetheart deal. Now, that in and of itself is a little bit bizarre. He supposedly gets a year. He has to call himself a pedophile. Nobody knows how he made his riches. And in addition to nobody knowing how he makes his riches, he has these weird relations where he's on like the Council of Foreign Relations or something, these kind of international bodies. And Acosta said, I was told that he's above my pay grade, as if this has something to do with some aspect of intelligence. So this case is weird right off the bat. Federal prosecutors come out and say, and these yes, it's illegal not to tell the victims. Yes, it's illegal not to tell the victims, which is the reason why the judge killed the deal. The judge was like, he squashed the deal. You can yell double jeopardy all you want, but it is illegal not to tell the victims of the deal. And again, that is in and of itself bizarre. That's weird. The fact that he was going to, work release. Nobody else would get that if they were a pedophile. That's weird. And so for the most part, you had somebody who was flagrant in regards to pedophilia. And yet, instead of spending, being thrown under the prison, was essentially being able to be in work release. That's weird. Fast forward. Federal prosecutors comes out in this kind of big show of anybody that wants to give us information on this guy's pedophilia, let us know. And goes further and talks about how this was Pedophile Island, which is in and of itself, that sounds gross. Pedophile Island. And it's like right off the bat, the naming of it tells you everything you need to know. But also this notion of the flight logs And the reason why we're really talking about this, beyond the fact of the pedophile Allen and the estates that he had in the various places, meaning it seems like an international thing, is because there are various political actors, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Bill Richardson, that prince in Britain. I mean, it goes down the list. What is the gentleman that got caught? Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose has been on forever. And you find out that Charlie Rose was working with Epstein in order to abuse a woman that was recommended to her, to Rose's employment. This case is nasty. So when those federal prosecutors come out and they draw a red circle around, we're going after this guy. And if anybody has any information about it, let us know. And then all of these people come out the woodwork and they start naming names. And Epstein tries to get out and the judge says, no, you have a Saudi passport. I have no idea why you have a Saudi passport. That's bizarre in and of itself. And you're supposedly nearly a billionaire. You have a lot of money. No, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay in prison. Epstein is found in his cell with marks around his neck and unconscious. Now, the guy who's in the cell with him was an ex-cop who had bodies buried in his backyard. Now, this sounds out there, but this is actually, everything I just said there is true. When asked, hey, how did he end up with marks around his neck and unconscious? I don't know. Look, I got bodies buried in my backyard, but I got nothing to do. Nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with this. Don't bring me into this. Nothing to do with this at all. So then he goes under suicide watch. Now, anybody that knows anything about suicide watch knows that the key word in that is watch. We're watching you because we don't want you to off yourself. From the standpoint of the federal authorities, it's the job of the federal authorities to make sure this person serves trial or goes to trial. And it's not what the federal authorities want for that person to escape justice by removing himself from life on this plane of existence. If he is no longer on this plane of existence, you cannot exact justice for the crimes that he did on this plane of existence. And so the goal of the federal authorities is to make sure he serves trial or goes to trial. And yet, the guy ends up dead. He ends up dead. How does that happen? He's supposedly on suicide watch. Now, this is not getting into conspiracy theory. Donald Trump screams, oh, Clinton body count, Clinton body count. Now, this is absurd. The people who are in the Democratic Party scream, Trump had something to do with it. Trump had him off. You know, the Democrats said Trump had him off, and the Republicans say Clinton had him off. This is another one of the Clinton body counts. What we do know, and what the reality of it is, this is a gross, gross miscarriage of justice if their job was to ensure that this person was alive, this person served trial, and this person ends up dead. And then the question that people ask, this person had names. There were names. There were lists of names, that black book with all of these political actors. Do you realize when Epstein case first came up, Pelosi's daughter put out a tweet essentially saying, look, there are going to be some people who shake through of this that you may like. However, you know, that shouldn't matter from a political sense. If these people are guilty, these people are guilty. Why did she send that tweet? She sent that tweet because she knew all of these names, all of these people, all of these political actors, all of these friends that this guy was close to. She knew. And the question becomes, who of them knew that he was like this and just didn't say? And by the way, Michael Wolff, you disagree with me on this, and the other host disagrees with me on this, because I don't know if this is true. This is conspiracy theory. But Wolf puts this case that Trump was the one that turned him into the cops, Epstein into the cops. Now, the reason they say this doesn't make Trump look good in the least. Trump, there was a real estate deal. Everybody knew that Trump was bankrupt. Epstein was looking at a property. He shows Trump the property, and Trump undercuts him and takes the property from Epstein. Epstein gets pissed and says, I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to tell everybody you're broke. And all of a sudden, Epstein gets popped on a charge of pedophilia. The question becomes, how long did Trump know and just not say anything? That's gross. That doesn't make the president look good. There were a bunch of Trump supporters out there like, oh, the mighty Trump. That doesn't make Trump look good. It means that Trump knew that Epstein was a pedophile and didn't say anything until it became disadvantageous to Trump. And by the way, there's backing for that. Trump sends out, it wasn't a tweet, but it was a quote that Trump made that, yeah, Epstein loves beautiful women, but he likes them young. How long did you know Donald Trump, president of the United States? How long did you know that this man was a pedophile and didn't say anything about it? Beyond that point, Epstein ends up dead while in federal custody, while supposedly on suicide watch. All sorts of conspiracy theories are rising from this. Why? because there's all sorts of people in the politics, in media, in security that wanted him dead. And just so happens, supposedly, he took his own life. All sorts of conspiracy theories are going to come from this for that very reason. The reality of it is we don't know. Bill Barr, Trump's guy, is going to get to the bottom of it, though. You think he's going to get to the bottom of it? You think he's that's the guy to get to the bottom?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you. Yeah. You're sitting here.
Well, I was listening to David Pakman, and he was saying, he brought up some pretty good points, and that was that if you expect Bill Barr to go after Trump equally as he would Bill Clinton, when we already know he's going after the Clintons, regardless of who killed who or who died how, then you're kidding yourself.
I don't have look, Pakman is in the camp of the Democratic Party, and so Pakman would say that, and Pakman, and they are going after the origins of the Russiagate case, which is different than going after the Clintons, and I want them to go after the origins of the Russiagate case. Look.
Okay, let me can you take a call?
Yeah. We take a call.
And what was your name again, sir? Mark? Okay, Mark. Hold on,
What's going on, Mark?
You there, Mark?
Yo,
Get the mic on.
congratulations on your new show.
Oh, thank you, man.
And I won't harass you about cryptos right now. The more important thing right now is that the whole country came together, finally, calling bullshit when the mainstream media said, oh, no, he totally committed suicide. It has nothing to do with his book of friends.
Wait, just so we clear, no cursing on there. I know I have
I'm sorry.
no, you're fine. I have a YouTube audience, and that YouTube audience they have a certain freedom of language. But while we're on the air for the radio, let's chill. Let's chill with the language.
Where was I? Oh, yeah, Book of Friends.
Yeah. The Book of Friends is interesting. That little black book.
My coworkers the other day about, hey, why do you think they all just no one believes that Epstein wasn't off.
Nobody believes that. I mean, it's too weird. Yeah, it's too weird. It's like everybody wanted him dead. Nobody wanted him talking. Like that's not true. Nobody that was not in that black book. Should I say it that way? If you were in that black book, if you were part of the media space or political space or Hollywood space, you didn't want him talking. You wanted him dead.
Yeah, and remember, his book of friends are all billionaires.
Yeah.
And or I heard there's a prince in there.
There is. I mean, in fact, that prince.
Somebody...
Well, let's talk about the prince for the moment. So there are photos of that prince with the woman who's accusing them, because that woman says that Epstein pushed her to have sex with all of these various political figures and so forth, including that prince. And there's photos with her and that prince, and there's a second accuser for that prince.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This whole case, like I noted before, in a very coy way, I believe that this person was so gross and it was so blatant how the mainstream media tried to finesse this, saying, hey, yeah, just so you know, nothing to see here. He totally committed suicide.
Right.
Take that sweet blue pill and go to sleep and make sure to work yourself to death.
You know, the interesting,
you like that here in America.
Here's the interesting part. I am not. The interesting thing is, if somebody says, look, people who were working there just thought he was extremely gross. And because they thought he was extremely gross, they weren't looking at this from the larger perspective of, we want this guy to serve trial, we want this guy in prison, we want to know the names and everything else. They just looked at it from the perspective of, I want this guy dead. This guy's horrible. That's possible. You know what I mean? That's it may not be kind of the larger thing of there's somebody who wanted to shut this guy up, in which case it might have just been this guy's in prison. People in prison treat pedophiles a particular way. They thought he was intensely gross, and the first opportunity they got to off him, they did. It literally could be that straightforward.
I still think that's just not planned negligence, but just purposeful negligence. Like saying, hey, yeah, we know, everybody knows what happens to kitty peddlers in prison. And what's it called? And he was literally. I saw a picture of that cop in Joe Rogan. Like, I feel like just his biceps alone could have done what happened to his.
Well, look, I want to see the video.
What would have pulled off any
There's
form
no video. That's
of,
even weird.
strain on the neck.
How is there no video
man.
of this? How weren't they
I saw
keeping
a
track
picture
of
that
this?
guy. He looked like shacked. Like he looked like people that are like supposedly roided up.
You talking about the guy who put the bodies in the backyard?
That was he was sharing his bed with.
Yeah.
He was literally the stereotype of of what happens when a rich person hits into what's it called, prison. Big Bubba. So.
And the guard on duty was a Kelly girl.
Really?
He's a temp. He wasn't even a real guard.
That's amazing. But that's what I mean. Like, incompetence, it often takes the case of, it's like, oh, no, it wasn't intentional. It was incompetence. Incompetence is always the dodge. Look, I don't know what happened to Epstein. I would imagine there were a lot of people that wanted Epstein dead. And so it's extremely, extremely, extremely coincidental that he just so happens, while in federal custody, supposedly on suicide watch, where he just tried to commit suicide, accidentally ends up dead entirely through incompetence. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here, folks.
As a side note, I'd like you to go down the history of this, because this is just too interesting. Like the history of this Mr. Epstein and stuff. Like I know the Cliff Notes. I've been reading it up, but I think it'll be interesting to hear and you're very good at boiling down the context of things. One of the reasons why I called, and plus it's congratulations. And we are like I said, the planned negligence is one of those things. Like you could just imagine a guy saying, "He's going to prison. Everybody knows what he is. Let nature take its course."
Yeah, and you know what's wild about it? Everybody said there's no way Epstein is going to survive, and guess what? He didn't survive. Nobody thought he was going to live. Everybody, because too many people wanted him dead. Like, it really did boil down to that. Dude, thank you for calling in, man. I appreciate your call, and thank you for the good wishes.
You're welcome. I'll go back to the YouTubes now, and hopefully nature will lead us to even more of the skeletons in his closet. It warms my heart to watch billionaires, just sweat a bit.
Yeah.
it gives this, a nice stress reliever.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Have a good day.
All right. So that's an interesting point. If you watch the financial channels, they don't quite know how he got his cash. Have you ever heard them talk, like on CNBC? And I had the opportunity to listen to financial channels. And when you're listening to them and talk about Epstein, they're like, we have no idea how this guy got his money. We have no idea why he was friends with all of these people. We have no idea. We have no idea. We have no idea. And yet he was in weird security services. He, like I said, Acosta said he was, beyond his pay grade. Like, it was very, very strange. And that's to say the least. So,
I have a theory on that. I don't know the specifics because I didn't research every bit of his life, but I've been reading this book of the 48 Laws of Power. And I heard one of the chapters that I read is if you have one thing you're good at, or one ledger or key to power that quote unquote matters, and you just lean into that. And in this case, it might be his connections as a kitty peddler.
Yeah.
He might have known a billionaire, millionaire, etc., that happened to know that, he happened to know that person likes kitties. And because you're on, the radio, that's why I'm using kitties.
Yeah.
And then he basically kind of leaned into that, did favors for that person, got maybe a ledger richer there than he probably. I hear he used to be a teacher of some sort of in maths or something. So maybe he did some stock trading, or options or whatever, and probably gain a little bit of money there. And then as his influence he was also in I hear in schools for rich kids and or or Rich College. I'm not exactly sure which. You could look that one up.
Let me.
And he probably made some connections there. And then, that money just kept piling up. And I always said, well, you don't know this, but I've always said that somebody that's relatively good at math and somebody also that's in stocks and knows the right people is just
make a ton of money.
bound to get rich. And if he's also has the book of secrets or had started with, claim to money, a book of friends.
Yeah.
Everything kind of comes together. He had a book of friends. That's his original note of power.
Mark,
and then he just kind of his relationships to get a little bit more power and money, more power here, more money there, scooping it up.
Mark, let me. I hate to interrupt you, man. I'm sorry. We need to do a commercial. Maybe not a commercial break, but we need to do an announcement for the.
Finish up that conspiracy theory. Have a good day, and I'll be listening to the YouTube.
Thanks, man. Have a good one, man.
Have a great afternoon, day, week.
All right. So look, guys, this is WRWK LP. Should I say LP? Don't say LP.
Well, it's low power FM.
Oh, okay.
93.9 FM.
So let's just say WRWK 939 FM. The Work FM, serving Chesterfield, Henrico, Richmond, Goochland, and Hanover. And guys, you can call in at 804-464-1089. And, I made this point before about the underwriter thing. We are trying to grow. So if you would like to underwrite this content, please feel free to do so. And Mark, thank you for calling in. WRWK is a volunteer-run, independent public radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you awesome, great, over-the-top, amazingly good programming. I'm going to go there. I think that's what it is. It takes roughly $60 a day to keep WRWK on the air. You can ensure the life of the station by making a donation or volunteering. Information at workfm.org. So the Epstein thing. So just for a slight thing for Mark was saying, look, there is a lot of oddities around this particular story. It is way beyond the pale for the president of the United States to go out and scream Clinton body count. That is beyond the pale, but that's what you expect from this president. By the same token, it is just as beyond the pale for the Democratic Party and elements of that party to go scream that Trump had something to do with it. It is bizarre. A lot of people wanted this man dead, and not just a lot of people, meaning of who were in the line of fire, but also people who just hated his guts because of what he was and didn't necessarily care about the larger implications. I wanted him to serve Trump. I wanted him on that stand. I wanted him recounting one thing after the next. I wanted him to spend day after day after day after day in prison with his needs barely being met, as opposed to him being nearly a billionaire with his needs being met 1,000-fold of a normal individual. That's what I wanted. And it's not beyond the pale to believe somebody who was an uber millionaire that had anything that he wanted at his fingertips with all sorts of power and control gets put into a prison where his reality changes on an instant, will try to off himself. That's not insane either. The catch becomes, why did he get the opportunity to do so? How did he get the opportunity to do so, considering he was on suicide watch? I don't care what he wanted. It's what the federal government in this case wanted, and that was for him to serve trial and for him to name names. So there's that about the Epstein thing. I find this case interesting. I followed this case on YouTube. This video gets immediately demonetized when you bring up Epstein, but that's fine. I find it to be important. I want to move on to the second topic for tonight. Hong Kong. Now, the people who are on my, who are watching on YouTube will be able to see this, but the audience won't. These are pictures from Hong Kong's airport. The kids and the people in Hong Kong who are pushing back have literally shut down the airport. There's a situation now where cops are trying to retain order or regain order in the airport, but right now the tactics of this have escalated to a certain degree of violence in pushing back. Now, I've always said, the audience in Chesterfield is not going to know this, but I've said on more than one occasion that issues of public strife, when the public gets together and gets in their head a very specific issue and something that they want to do and something they want to accomplish, meaning when they're protesting and it's organized, let's say like in Paris, or let's say like in the Ukraine, or let's say like in Hong Kong, or let's say in like Russia. Yeah, there are a lot of these. It starts as one thing. Oh, we just want bread. We just want bread. We're sick of this war. The czar, he sucks. And then it changes to, No, not just bread. We want a certain degree of autonomy. We don't like the czar, and we want to take the czar down. It goes. Oh, fair enough. Okay, sorry. This notion of it starts off as bread, and then it turns into something else. And then in Paris, it starts off as, we don't like this fuel tax. You're charging us. You've cut taxes on the top 1% on the rich, and you're increasing our taxes, trying to deal with the environmental issue on our backs by increasing fuel costs. It's hard to know this, but in France, the fuel costs, they were trying to charge like $10 a gallon for fuel. And so the people flipped out, they got pissed off. But what happened? It immediately went from, we're just angry at the fuel tax, to great disinterest or dissatisfaction with the government as a whole. And we want Macron's head. They've been out there protesting for the last 4 or 5 months. What happened with Hong Kong? Hong Kong started off as, we don't want to be sent over to China. We don't want that law into place because we believe that that is a sliding scale. And what happened? It eventually turned into a larger dissatisfaction with this notion between Hong Kong and China, and this notion that Hong Kong belongs to China. Now, here's the catch, and this is where context comes in. This case is not as straightforward as it may seem from the perspective of the American audience. There is a larger history in the context from the standpoint of China. Look, I had the opportunity, this is a detour, but the detour will make sense. I had the opportunity to go to Poland. And while I was in Poland, I had a conversation with one of the doctors there. And, you know, I'm a lefty's lefty. And my thing is, the United States should not be policemen of the world. It's not our responsibility. We should not be paying nearly $1 trillion a year for military when we have all of these other issues that we have to deal with, but we could spend $1 trillion on military. And my point is, that's a jobs program. Half of that money is literally paid for jobs. We can reinvest that money back into the economy itself and grow those jobs at home as opposed to using the military as a jobs program. His point is, well, you know, the Russians may take Poland. And we got into this back and forth over this notion of the U.S.'s role in all of this and whether or not we should get involved in this, but also Russia. And my point is, the United States has been acting extraordinarily unfair with all of this Russia hysteria. And his thing was, I don't care. Now, he would agree with me, but his thing was, I don't care. Why? Because of the history of Russia or the Soviet Union in regards to Poland, and how bad the Soviet Union was in Poland. I mean, they were as bad as Hitler in Poland. Stalin had a grudge against the Soviet Union. Stalin had a grudge because Stalin, it was his fault that he got blamed for, look, the Red Army should have been able to take Poland. The Red Army was not able to take Poland because Stalin made a mistake. Stalin was roundly criticized for this and blamed for this and had a grudge against Poland. So what did he do? When he got the opportunity to take Poland during the treaty that Hitler and the Pact of Steel or whatever it's called, he took vengeance out. It stays in the culture. The culture remembers that. That what, 50, 60 years ago, it is ingrained in the culture every so bit as much as race is in the United States. I'm saying that other societies, other cultures have certain things that they've had to deal with in a cultural sense that digs ever so deep in those cultures in the same way that race digs here in the United States. I'm using race in the United States because that's the thing that digs in us, where we act in particular ways, almost in unconscious ways, in cultural ways. And I'm saying that the same thing is true elsewhere. Yes, I'm nailing this point home because this point is infinitely important. The same thing is true for China. Do you realize that at one point the West ran roughshod over Chinese interests, going into this notion of forcing opium into the society itself? Do you believe that China, that was subjugated by Western powers, has forgotten the fact that they were subjugated by Western powers and the deep embarrassment associated with it? I guarantee you they have not. In the same way that we have not forgotten about issues of slavery, in the same way that the Poland have not forgotten about issues of the Soviet Union and the things that have taken place. You can go across the board on this. It digs deep. So what happens? So you see this issue in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong was taken from China in retaliation for China not liking the fact of what Britain was doing and what the Western powers were doing. Look at this. You can't see this, but these are American flags being shown in Hong Kong. Why are they showing American flags in Hong Kong? Here's another interesting point. And for the moment, put right and wrong to the side for the moment. We're just talking about historical context. It was taken from China. Hong Kong was taken from China by the Brits. Now, this became somewhat of a British colony. Britain gave this back to China, I think it was in the 90s, with this notion that in 50 years, this notion of a two systems policy, one system for Hong Kong and one system for China, would somewhat collapse into one. What you're seeing here are these people saying, we don't want that Chinese system. Whereas China is saying, not only is it an embarrassment, a deep embarrassment for us that this has taken place, because after all, Hong Kong technically belongs to China, and technically it was ripped away from China by the Brits. All of us, the English speaking, the raising of the American flags, the signs in English, the protests in and of themselves at this notion that China is going to somehow take control at some point is a deep, deep cultural embarrassment. Let's add another stone to this, or log to this fire. A representative from the United States was caught working with the individuals in these protests. Oh, that digs deeper, because now it looks like that the United States is adding its own, let's say, flavor to this to help these protesters out. And the tactics of the protesters have changed. Is it possible that the tactics of the protesters have changed because they were working with elements of the United States that was trying to tell them ways to make their protests more effective, and potentially giving them money and that type of thing in order to make this protest that much more significant? The answer is most likely yes. The US and China have been in a trade war. Do you believe that trade war is going to stay specifically to trade? The United States have been giving weapons to Taiwan. Taiwan is another country that China is deeply embarrassed by. Because, again, this runs roughshod over this notion of sovereignty. And from the standpoint of China, Taiwan is their territory, just like Hong Kong is their territory. They've shut down the airport. The cops have gotten involved in this process. China has sent out a video. God, I don't have a video on this one. China has sent out the video with their troops talking about going to mainland Hong Kong in order to restore order, essentially saying we will no longer tolerate this behavior and this impudence. They sent out a full video. The video was in English. And not just the video was in English, the video was directly related to the protesters and to the street conflict that they're talking about having. It is a threat. It is an open threat. Now, whether or not they will go through with that threat or not is unknown. Here's the point, though. Whatever happens in this, the U.S. doesn't care. From a foreign policy standpoint, if China sends its military in to restore order in Hong Kong, the United States is going to sit back and it's going to wag its finger at China and say, look at you. You're running roughshod. You're brutal beasts that are doing this thing to these people who just want freedom and liberation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Forgetting the historical context of it. Historical context goes out the window at that point. If you don't do that, and Hong Kong starts to say, we want self-determination and we no longer want to be under the thumb of China, then even that in and of itself is a win. Both situations are wins for the United States from a standpoint of foreign policy. If you're looking at this from a zero-sum game, and your thought is to either embarrass China or to get China to involve its military in Hong Kong. The U.S. does not care about Hong Kong in the sense of the individuals and freedom and liberty and justice and all the other stuff. What it cares about is embarrassing China. And it does that in either case. So the thing with Hong Kong is fascinating. And pay attention to Hong Kong because there is a larger context that is playing out right now in regards to historical context with Hong Kong.
And there's Taiwan is watching very closely.
Yes, it is.
I was there in 2015. And
where are you?
Protest out there in the parks.
Well, the Taiwan thing is fascinating because if you remember, Taiwan, if I remember this correctly, I'm counting this off the top of my head, but there was a fleeing into Taiwan with this notion that Taiwan was at one point the actual government of China. Do you remember this? This was, at one point, Taiwan was supposedly the actual government of China. China bristled at this, and it looks like nonsense because this tiny, tiny country of Taiwan, as opposed to the overwhelming thing of China. But at some point, people stopped looking at Taiwan as being the actual government of China and started looking at China as being the actual government of China.
Well, yeah, a lot of people don't know that Taiwan's name, according to China, is the People's Republic of China, or ROC, Republic of China.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. People we pay no attention to the historical precedent of stuff. And it's like when Trump gave all of those weapons to Taiwan, China bristled. They bristled at that because in their mind, again, this is an undermining of their authority. Because again, if Taiwan exists as an independent thing, Taiwan, is trying to go with this notion that we are the the government of China. Well, at this point, they're not. Times change. The catch becomes Hong Kong. Should Hong Kong be an individual entity at this point? My argument is yes. Like, going beyond the historical precedent and all this other stuff, put that part to the side for the moment. The people of Hong Kong at this point is something of it's a distinct thing unto themselves. And just like I would say that anybody that's become, or any group that's become a distinct thing to themselves, they have autonomy and all of this other stuff, I have no issue with Hong Kong being a distinct thing to itself, not under the thumb of China. However, China is not going to allow that. And by the way, if the United States was in the same situation, the United States wouldn't allow it either. I mean, let's just be honest. It's not, both of those things can be true at once. It's like, yes, Hong Kong is a thing unto itself at this point. And yeah, I totally understand why they would want a certain degree of autonomy and not want to be under the Chinese system. Simultaneously, any government, any state have a hard time giving up what they consider to be theirs. And, from a historical precedent, Hong Kong was ripped away from China. So from China's standpoint, it's ours. Now, Britain shouldn't have given Hong Kong back over like it was a piece of meat. There's that. By the same token, again, from a historical precedent, it initially was China's. It's a fascinating dynamic that's taken place in regards to this. And there is a larger historical precedent just at work. These forces are at work and they're playing themselves out. You're not going to get that from the media. Mainstream media is not going to fully go into that part. Mainstream media is just going to say, we just support Hong Kong full-throatedly.
Well, if they fail, if the demonstrators fail, it has very dire consequences for Taiwan and Hong Kong, and for the world, really, because these are really amazing democracies. They're incredibly successful. They refer to them as the mini dragons, China being the mother dragon.
Yeah.
And of their own right, they are incredibly powerful, economically success stories. And I'm really worried about how it's going to play out.
I am too. I look, at the point where China is threatening to send its military in, I suspect they would do it. I mean, look, one of the things that China has said, we would never allow ourselves to be subjugated by Western powers again, ever, period. And why? Because in the same way that we have these certain cultural things that dig in us based on historical precedent, they do too. They were embarrassed. I was going through, recently I've been binging certain books on the history of World War II. Albert Speer's book is amazing. His book is amazing. But Beaver's books on Berlin and Stalingrad, the Spanish Civil War, those books are extraordinary. But one of the Speer's book is probably more fascinating because Speer's book gets into Hitler and the things that are going on in his head when he's thinking about doing all of this stuff. One of the things that continuously, over and over and over again, comes up is insecurity. Why? The Versailles Treaty. From Hitler's standpoint and from Germany's standpoint, the Versailles Treaty embarrassed them tremendously. It dug into them in a cultural way. It was a gross embarrassment. And so from their standpoint, all of this had a lot to do with all of this had a lot to do with his own insecurities. This notion that Germany is not going to be, subordinate. Germany is a major nation, just like the other nations. Germany is not going to take settle fiddle. All of this stuff. A lot of this had to do with the insecurities brought about by the previous war and the Versailles Treaty and what Germans and Hitler himself had internalized as a certain inferiority complex. My point is this. In the same way that it dug in them, in the same way race digs in us, in the same way that Brits had this notion of being masters of the world, and that is still in their heads, even to this day, as the UK falls apart politically. It digs in China also. And we need to respect that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with accepting that other countries have their own cultural biases. The catch becomes whether those cultural biases should run the gambit of being the end-all, be-all in regards to the way you come from a decision and a perspective of who you agree or disagree with. By the same token, keeping all that stuff into account and at the very least acknowledging and respecting. Guys, you can call in at 804-464-1089. This is WRWK 939 FM. So again, this is a volunteer-run, independent, public-run radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you awesome programming. It takes roughly $60 a day to keep WRWK on the air. You can ensure the life of the station by making donations or volunteering. Information is at workfm.org. Yeah, look, pay attention to what's taking place in Hong Kong, because the trade war that the United States is taking with China, United States giving weapons to Taiwan, at this point, China working in Venezuela, all of these things are tit for tat politics. And even though it may start off as a trade war, sometimes these things have a tendency to escalate. So just be aware. I find this to be a fascinating bit of news. I want to step to American politics for the moment. Have you been following? I know you've been following American politics. You're a creature of politics just like me. Polling. So one, Mr. Joe Biden, I have argued that Joe Biden's things are not gaffes, that these are issues related to degradation of age. And this is not, I asked the question, is Joe Biden too old? My answer is always no. It's not an issue of Joe Biden being too old. It's that age sometimes brings along certain degradations in regards to being slower and everything else. I support Sanders. Sanders is just as bit as old as Joe Biden, but I don't think he's been having the mental lapses. It doesn't seem like, he doesn't have the thing where anybody's questioning whether or not he's mentally fit for the job. He clearly wants it. He has certain policy things that he definitely, whatever you want to say about him, wants to accomplish. He wants it. He's aggressive for it. Biden just seemed like he wants to be president. Seems like he's kind of out of it. And, it is what it is. He's been running for president for 40 years. And if you are doing a job, you may think to yourself, okay, the next step in this job is X. In his case, he may think that the next job is this is president. But it is not my responsibility to put somebody in that office just because they want to be in that office. In the same way that a blind person may want to drive a truck across the country, the city, the state, the country says, no. You're blind. You're going to be a detriment to the other people on the road. I sympathize with your issue, but no. I said the same thing for the mental degradation in regards to being president of the United States. Tap him on the shoulder. I understand, Joe, but no. It's what it is. It's not a bad thing. People get older. I get older. I'm slower. I'm weaker. Usually experience minds the gap on this, but experience demands that you have a mental sanity. And where am I going with this? Why I'm saying this? Joe Biden didn't know when the killings took place recently. He didn't know. Why? Because, he's not altogether there. And beyond that point, Joe Biden kept calling Theresa May Margaret Thatcher, which, he kept doing it. It's not more than one occasion. Somebody acts on a debate stage. Somebody says, Joe Biden doesn't seem to know that he's on a debate stage. It's like, does Joe Biden even know where he is? And if you look at the debates going before, Joe Biden was an effective debater. Go back and look at his debates with Sarah Palin. Joe Biden had the political awareness enough to say, okay, I can't make her look too bad, because if I make her look too bad, they'll say I'm taking advantage of her. He did awesome. The debates with Paul Ryan, same thing. He did an amazing job in those debates with Paul Ryan. He crushed Paul Ryan in those debates. If you look back at the old ones, he used to be an effective debater. This debate, Joe Biden got pushed around. And not just pushed around, they hit him repetitively, and he did not have the ability to defend himself, even though, from a political sense, Kamala Harris's record on busing is exactly as Joe Biden's. And, Kamala Harris has an atrocious political record in regards to being a prosecutor. But Joe Biden couldn't get off the step to defend himself on it. You know what I mean? Like, and I can go further. There's more. The black vote. Him raising segregationists up as the height of people are going, wait, let me get this out. Him raising up segregationists as the height of civility in a primary where the majority of the participants are black, or where a large majority, where blacks vote 90%. I'm sorry, that's a problem.
Yeah.
We need to tap Joe on the shoulder and say that.
We only have like 5 more minutes.
Yeah. If somebody wants to go after me, go for it. Let's hear him. Let's hear him. I'm being bombastic, and I know I have some Democrats here who are like, "Oh, how dare you, sir!" So let's hear him out. What's going on, man? What's your name?
Hey, Jamal, this is Noah. I'm a long-time listener. I really appreciate the show. It's going along great.
Thanks, man.
I just wanted to bring up a quick point.
Go for it.
Question. We're talking about the establishment Democratic candidates right now with Joe Biden.
Yeah.
We see that they're putting forward relatively weak candidates, I would say, compared to the non-establishment candidates such as Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, who have enormous popular support. It seems as though, I'll just leave it with this. What do you think of the establishment Democratic power position going forward after the 2020 election?
So that gets interesting, and because it depends. We're in an interregnum. What I mean by interregnum is the notion of who's in charge. It's up for grabs. You have a strong push for elements of the Democratic Party. Look, let me say it this way. The Democratic Party, after losing to reality show hosts, also lost 1,300 seats all throughout the United States, or 1,100 seats all throughout the United States. House, Senate, Supreme Court, the presidency, not to mention governorships and everything else. The Republican ran the board on the reality shows. This is the most rabid bunch of Republicans that we've ever seen in this country, and the Democratic Party was completely defenseless and defending it.
In a year, I might add that people were bemoaning the death of the GOP, saying they would never.
Yeah, right.
Bush said I might be the last Republican leader.
Right, because they were like, Obama is dead. It's like, this is it. This is our coalition. This is it forever. And then what do you know? Bam, all of it's gone. All of it's gone. So what happens after that? Well, you lose credibility. Not just lose credibility, the other elements of the party, the left in the party, the politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party, the left, the progressives, who for the longest time have been told you can't win, you need to sit in a corner, we're the responsible people, we know how to win, we know what we're doing, and what happened? They lose it all. They lose it all. And it goes beyond just losing. What does that mean in regards to the various communities throughout the country? What does it mean from regards to policy that Trump is implementing? They lost it all. They were playing brinksmanship with this notion that, oh, well, people are going to be forced to vote for Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump clearly is not tenable as a choice. They were wrong. They were wrong 1,000 times. They were wrong. So what happens? You have an interregnum. You have these lefties who used to be the politically abused spouses of the Democratic Party saying, well, wait a minute, you guys lost. How are you guys the adults in the room when you guys can't win? And so you have various people throughout the country who are saying, I'm pushing for Medicare for all. Why not? You guys lost. You're a centrist. You lost. You have other people saying, I want free college. I want to expand my college. And you have all of these lefties who now are feeling themselves because of the complete breakdown and failure of the Democratic Party. You have Bernie Sanders, who set off running. When Sanders started running, if you remember, they couldn't even get the public option on the thing. At this point, Medicare for all has become somewhat of a litmus test. You have a sea change. You have an interregnum that has taken place in the context of what is considered to be the left. The reason why I said that answer is kind of difficult to give is because it depends on who the Democratic Party puts as a standard bearer. If Sanders becomes a standard bearer, then what it means to be a Democrat fundamentally changes. If this guy, who's an independent senator from Vermont, who calls himself a socialist or a democratic socialist, is the standard bearer, and he is going to be browbeating and pushing and cajoling a different policy prescription of what it means to be a Democrat, it changes. You go back to an FDR type style back in the 50s and 60s, where Democrats were actually Democrats, and there were the difference between the two parties. That's a positive thing. That's not a negative thing. You're going to have a door to walk through, meaning you're going to have all sorts of ads and things trying to scare you to death. Oh, it's going to be the end of the healthcare industry. You know, you should want to pay twice as much as the rest of the world for your drugs. You should want $50,000 of debt on your back when you go to school. Those are things that you should want and love as Americans. It's freedom to have, to die in the streets without healthcare. That's freedom. That's, of course, nonsense. And if you make that argument to the American public, this is, yes, there should be higher taxes on the rich. Yes, our public services should be funded. Why wouldn't you want to fund those things? That makes no sense to not fund those things. When you make that argument, and you make that argument to the American public in a way that's strong, and you're not terrified of the argument, public opinion changes. The Democratic Party.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing how tightly they're trying to gain grasp with the notions they say, like anyone but Trump. It's like, well, no, not anyone but Trump. The Democratic Party used to be for the working class, used to be for the working man, and I think a lot of Americans do feel that it's swayed away from that. Over the course of years, it's moved towards the establishment party. It's very close in a lot of ways to the Republican Party.
Well, look, Trump won for a reason. And it wasn't because everybody was racist and sexist. It wasn't, those are things, it wasn't because of the Russians. There's a reason that the American public decided we want to put this reality show host in over Hillary Clinton. There was a reason. And it went beyond just Russians and racists. I'm sorry. There was a letdown in regards to what the Democratic Party represented. Dude, I'm going to let you go because we're about to end. Dude, I really appreciate you calling in, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
All right. All right. This was an awesome show. I'm going to read this. This is WRWK 939 FM community radio. And this is a volunteer-run independent public radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you this awesome programming. And, I said this in the beginning that if there are any underwriters that would like to assist this content, please feel free. We are a talk radio. If it's one of those things where you don't mind underwriting, or if you want to underwrite and you want this show to come on more, let me know. That is also up for grabs. I guess my point is to ensure the life of this radio station, you can make a donation or volunteer. The information is at WRWK.org. This is going to be the voice for your radio hour on Tuesdays. I would imagine there are going to be a lot of people who disagree with me, and that's perfectly okay. Disagreement is fine. You're going to be more than likely or more than willing or able to call into the radio station to give your grievances. Again, I am not necessarily stuck into any of the parties. I have certain policy prescriptions that go beyond any notion of party that I want to accomplish in this country because I think it'll make it a better country. So is there anything else that you want to say before we head up?
Well, only that if you go to the WRWK.org, there's a donate button, and there's also, which takes to PayPal. We haven't switched over to Patreon yet. And you can make a one-time donation or a recurring monthly donation on that donate button. Also, if you go to the WRWKFM.org, there's a listen live button, and you can stream your content to your phone and Bluetooth it to your radio if you're out of our listening area.
Before we end this, we have 3 minutes. I want to show something to my audience. This is the audience on air won't be able to see this, but this is a group, Jews for Peace, I believe, holding up a sign saying "Never again" means never again. What they're talking about are the deportations, the Gestapo-esque type forces that are grabbing people and taking them away into camps that are already jam-packed to the gills. The Trump administration tried to make the argument that not having soap or not having toothpaste is sanitary. No, this is utter nonsense. And then on top of not having sanitary conditions, to be continually filling those non-sanitary areas with more and more people. I don't make the argument that what's taking place is concentration camps in the sense of Nazis. I think that's crazy. However, they are our own version of concentration camps. And it is commendable that they're out here with these signs saying "never again" means never again. We should feel some kind of way about it. Even if you believe that we need to strengthen the border, even if you believe there shouldn't be open borders, I don't believe there should be open borders. Even if you believe that we need more security, all that stuff, fair enough. But we should do a better job.
Have you ever heard a Democrat or anyone ever say they wanted open borders?
No, but it's always what Republicans say. Democrats, they secretly want open borders. And I think it's not.
I'm surrounded by Democrats all day. I have never, ever once heard one say they wanted open borders.
And I'll go one better. Obama, Hillary, even Biden, if you look back to the old debates, they sound like Trump. We need to stop these people from coming here. We need to create a disincentive, et cetera, et cetera. Even what the deportations that Obama was doing, he deported 3 million people. How's it open border? In fact, he was making the conditions bad to prevent people from wanting to come here. The problem here is that if you're leading ganglands, then regardless of what the United States is doing, you're not going to be a gangland. You're trying to get your people to a better life. I guess I'm saying Democrats don't want open borders. It's nonsense, and it's a perspective that Republicans take. And regardless of whether you think there should be border security or not, at the very least, can we at least come down on the side that what is taking place at these borders is atrocious, and we can do a better job as Americans. Never again should mean never again, and I give Jews for Peace credit for doing so.
With inexplicable joy that they were scarcely
I'll
able
end it
to
here,
speak.
guys. Thank you.
It was altogether
Next Tuesday.
extraordinary and unaccountable. A few minutes after the declaration, Sweater appeared at the window and made a sort of speech, but only fragments of it were audible to the cheering crowd, who at intervals caught such phrases as slashing blow, sweep the country, grand old liberal flag, and so on. Next, then closed